Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Manitpal Singh. In today's video, I'll be talking about why finding your niche is not as important as people say it is when starting your personal brand. If you go online looking for advice on how to start a YouTube channel, how to grow your Instagram page, the first thing you're going to find people saying is narrow down your topics to be a very specific niche. But if you're like me and you have a ton of different interests, just picking one topic to make all your content about is not easy. And in fact, having to pick your niche right at the beginning of your personal brand may stop you from making anything in the first place. I've made 75 videos on my YouTube channel so far, and some of my most successful videos are completely unrelated from each other. Yes, it is important to figure out what your niche is over time, but when you're starting out, picking your niche is not as important as people say. So if you're interested in learning what you should be focusing on when starting your personal brand so you can start growing and getting your work out there, keep on watching. The first suggestion I have is don't worry too much about what your niche is, but instead focus on figuring out who your target audience actually is. When starting a personal brand, the thing we're trying to accomplish is building a community of people with like-minded interests to what we have. We want to have an audience that is actively engaged with the content that we're putting out there. However, the biggest issue you might be facing is that you're trying to appeal to too many different groups of people. You may be making videos about technology, but you also have interest in cooking or travel, whatever it might be. This is actually a very real problem to have. The last thing you want to be doing is upsetting groups of people who subscribe to your profile because they want to see a specific set of topics that you're talking about. If you're an Instagram blogger making content about arts and crafts and suddenly shift to something like fashion, you risk losing that engagement from your original audience. The way you solve this is by focusing on your target audience, not the topics that you're making content about. For example, let's say you're a Sikh and you decide to make your primary target audience to be Sikhs. All you care about is getting your work out there and seen by other Sikhs. By doing this, you're giving yourself the freedom to talk about anything you want. You can talk about Sikh technology, Sikh cooking recipes for langar, Sikh music like rags or instruments, Sikh fashion like apparel. It doesn't really matter. Even though you're talking about a very wide array of topics that fall under different categories or different niches, you're still building a very strong community of people that are relevant to your target audience. And these people will be very engaged with your work. And you can always narrow down into a specific topic later on. When it comes to figuring out what your target audience should be, one tip that I have that worked really well for me is figure out all the different communities of people that you belong to and pick one that resonates with you the most. Some things that might be on your list may be the Sikh community, what you do for your job, it could be a hobby that you're involved with, any sports that you do. These are all potential target audiences. Okay, the second reason why choosing your niche when starting your personal brand is bad advice is that quantity is more important than quality when starting out. When starting your personal brand, regardless of what it might be or what it might be about, you obviously want to make sure the work you're putting out there is good quality and represents you well. But what ends up happening is we actually end up focusing on the small details and we lose track of the bigger picture. We sometimes even stop ourselves from posting anything because it's not as good as it can be. This is a huge obstacle when starting out your personal brand. Making sure everything is perfect, it could really stop you from publishing your work to begin with, or if it doesn't stop you completely, it'll definitely slow you down. The way around this is shift your perspective to focus on quantity over quality. Now, for all the perfectionists watching this right now, you may be wondering why in the world would I intentionally put work out there that is not the best it can be? And how does this relate to finding your niche? Let me explain. When you first start your personal brand, the first pieces of work that you publish probably aren't going to be too good. And when you look back on them, it's going to make you cringe. The best way to improve your content so you don't cringe on it every time you look back on it is to make a lot of it. The more quantity that you make, the more your quality will increase naturally. Think of it this way. When you want to make a piece of content, put a deadline on it of when you want to release it. When that deadline comes, force yourself to post that piece of work no matter how good or bad it is. Do this over and over again and I guarantee you'll be making small changes each time you publish your work. That's exactly what happened with my YouTube videos. I started doing weekly uploads and each video wasn't perfect, but I learned something new each time I posted a video. And the amazing part about this is if you don't have a niche picked out yet, you can actually post a lot more. You aren't limiting yourself of what content you have to make. If you have an idea that comes to mind, as long as it's relevant to your target audience, you can make it and post it. For YouTube, a piece of advice I heard from Ali Abdaal, who's one of my favorite YouTubers right now, is that your first 100 videos are going to be trash. So just keep focusing on getting past those first 100, and after that, you can start being more strategic of what your niche and what other topics you want to make. This applies for any platform, whether you're a YouTuber, a podcaster, a photographer. Just keep posting your work, get the quantity out there, and your quality will naturally increase with time. And by focusing on quantity, you're also building a very large backlog of content that will keep you motivated to to keep creating. It'll also keep attracting that audience that you want to engage with. The third and final reason I have for not worrying too much about what your niche should be is that you should be focusing more on doing what you love and creating content that you're passionate about. When you start your personal brand, you normally start by creating content that you just genuinely enjoy doing that sparks a big passion behind your work. But as you continue doing it, what sometimes ends up happening is you go down this rabbit hole of creating content for the sake of creating content, or by finding content ideas that are relevant to being more successful, but not necessarily relevant to you being happy with the work that you're doing. If this is the path that you end up going down, you are gonna become burnt out. The only way to build a sustainable personal brand or a side hustle that's long-term and successful is by doing something that you genuinely enjoy doing, by making content that you love. If that means picking a different niche every single time you post your content, then I say do that. Be authentic to yourself. People aren't gonna care if all your content follows a very similar theme or a subject. What they care about is you. What they care about is that you're doing something that you're passionate about. And what they care about is how you can add value to their lives. So instead of spending hours, days, or even weeks trying to figure out what your niche should be or what your subject matter should be about, just start creating something. Follow your intuition and the rest will figure itself out on its own. If you've been watching my videos, you've probably seen a transition from technology to book reviews to productivity to personal branding. And what I'm trying to do myself right now is find something that I truly love, and I've been experimenting with different ideas. If you're interested in learning more about my personal journey and how I make these decisions of what content I make, I strongly want to suggest checking out my blog as well as my weekly newsletter. Every month I spend a few hours writing a blog post that helps me reflect on the month that I just had and all the challenges that I've faced, similar to the things I've talked about in this video. If you're interested in those blog posts, leave a link down below in the description, but I also send them out in my weekly email newsletter, so check that out as well. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found value in this video. I really appreciate you watching to the very end. I'll see you guys next week. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.